What's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you before?
The most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that for you?
Sure. You have my answer.
I have your answer.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, please tell me.
So, actually, I would love for you to tell everybody how you closed out as a pastor at Church 419, former Relevant Church.
Say what happened?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
What was your last message?
So before I listened to the Lord and followed my call to go full-time with Idols Aside, I was preaching my last sermon on staff, and so I'm preaching about John the Baptist. He's out in the wilderness. He's preparing the way. He's eating wild locusts, and I was trying to say he was wearing camel's hair, and in front of 800 people, I said John the Baptist was wearing a camel's toe. The most embarrassing thing I've ever had happen.
So,
how do you recover from that?
I mean, the oxygen left the room, and
I was there.
And,
We call you Camel Toe Pastor now.
Camel Toe Pastor, and everybody's like looking at each other, and I'm like, just get it out. And so everybody was laughing. I said, yeah, this is my last sermon on staff, one way or the other.
And then we hired you like a week later. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But the Lord was protecting me because they record every service, and
that one
it was gone. It was done.
That was not. Yep.
There was not a recording of it.
That one was not
I don't know
recorded.
how it happened. It was the Lord.
So. Broke the machine.
They would have went viral. They would have been the next big church.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think one of my most embarrassing moments was I was in a grocery store one time picking up some groceries for Becky, and I'm in the produce, vegetable department, and just being a good husband, good father, getting those things for the family. And this lady was walking up right next to me, had like a little tank top on, had the perfect little bump. And I looked at her and I said, when's your due date? And she looked at me and she said, I'm not pregnant. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I took off.
Left.
Yeah.
I don't need
that was a rough
after
one.
all.
I'm so scared now that any woman I see that I think is pregnant, I am never going. I mean, it was a perfect round bump.
Oh my
God. I don't know if she had a tumor in there or a beer belly. I don't know what it was, but I'm scared. I'm scared. Yeah. I'm never gonna do that again.
You ever seen the movie 2 Weeks Notice?
No.
Does that.
To see it now.
And then she gets mad. She says she's not pregnant. And the next time she's like, why don't you congratulate me? Because she really was pregnant. She's like, I don't want to say anything.
We may not. We may ask Becky and Holly in a little bit.
Y'all can think about it.
Y'all can think about
thanks.
it.
We appreciate the heads
We
up.
may finish the podcast out with those two questions for
Our
y'all.
most embarrassing moments.
But
I
hey,
really get embarrassed. Like,
I don't get embarrassed easily.
yeah.
But I'm sure there's,
Oh,
or maybe there's just
I've got
so
a
many
few
at
on
this
you.
point. I'm
You can't
really good.
remember what they
Well,
are.
I'm sure you
I've
do.
got a story
And I
too.
know. And hopefully
But,
by now I've suppressed them.
We'll say
Send me back to
that
counseling if we talk about
for
them.
the end of the podcast. But
That is
hey, I'm excited today, more than ever, to have my better half on the podcast, my wife, and then to have this amazing young lady too. Young.
We're
I said
young
young,
ladies,
right?
yes.
I'll
I'm not
take
saying
it.
her age. I'm not getting in trouble. But Holly Holm, come on. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah,
Mrs.
thanks for
Wright and
coming.
Holly Holm on the podcast. And only female ever to be champion in MMA and boxing. I mean, that is cool. I think the only other person I think of that is like a dual champion is Bo Jackson. Pro Bowl in the NFL,
Right.
All-Star in baseball, and then we've got the female version of Bo here, right? Yeah. She's a double champion in 2 sports. I mean, you just never see that.
Crazy.
That's awesome. But the coolest thing about Holly is she loves Jesus.
Awesome.
She's got a story to tell, and we're going to ask her some questions today about life and some things that I think it will be a blessing to a lot of single mamas and girls in our program. So, yeah.
I found it interesting that you're known as the preacher's daughter. I'm a PK.
Okay.
And so that was an interesting piece of your story when they told me you were coming. And obviously what these guys do every day, we see the effects of the presence or the absence of a father in kids' lives all the time. So with that being your, known fighting name and all, like, what do you think, how has that affected you? How has your relationship with your earthly father affected who Holly Holm is today?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you how I got the name.
I love it.
Obviously, I am a preacher's daughter, so that's how I got the name. But I didn't really want a fight name. I just didn't. I just wanted to be called Holly Holm.
Yeah.
And so they would just say, well, what's your ring name? What's your ring name? What's your ring name? And they would just start making stuff up. I think there was a fight, they called me H squared. One they called me Hollywood. One they called me Holly Hottie. Like, and I was like, you can't just give a name.
Yeah, no.
And finally I was like, well, to avoid all that, I might as well just, and I was like, just call me the preacher's daughter, because that's what I am. And I am close with my father.
That's awesome.
And I'm proud to be,
Yeah.
you know, I'm proud to, I guess, I always want to represent Jesus with anything that I do.
That's awesome.
And so it does come with, well, now that's also everybody knows. So I got to kind of be careful what I say as well, which I should be careful of that regardless, right? And I've tried to be real, but also try to not wanting to do anything wrong because people are watching is good, because then it's things I should be trying to do anyway.
Kind of like what Jace did when you said camel toe instead of camel's hair.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible.
That's awesome. That's cool. We see that relationship shape. And so I think that's just neat that you bring that in. And I think it does probably raise eyebrows. We've always said growing up in that environment, we grew up in a glass house, you know? And so you didn't get the privilege of being able to hide in that glass house. It's really kind of cool that you wear that and you wear it well, but it's also kind of neat that you say it's a responsibility you carry. So I love that.
Yeah, we should want to be doing right.
Yeah.
As much as I'm very flawed and I do a lot of things that are not right, but we should be wanting to do the right thing anyway. Even if the spotlight's not on us, you know, we should be doing it, whether people are watching or not. But, you know, I do have a good relationship with my father. That's and awesome. You know, he used to be in my corner for the fights and things like that. But I'm thankful for him, and I'm also thankful that I was taught by my parents about our Heavenly Father, because a lot of people ask me what I'm super thankful for from growing up, and I'm thankful for that. Not all people are raised with believers as parents, and that would be even, you know, it's all of our own choice and our own decisions to believe and to follow. And I can't imagine what that would be like when you don't have that guidance, or, you know, being, you know, there's a lot of my friends that were not raised really knowing or being a believer. One of my friends, actually, we were roommates with her. Not that she wasn't a believer, she just never really was raised in the church, and she didn't go to church. And my other friend and I, we went to church all the time. We used to, on the way to church, be like, do you think she'll go with us sometime? We didn't want to push too much, you know. And the more she started asking us, she's like, well, I don't understand this with the church or that with the church. And it's like, well, you know, I think one of the things was, one of the conversations was, you know, like, oh, they don't accept these people. Or, and I said, no, it's not that. It's that they have to preach what the Bible teaches. It's uncomfortable to hear sometimes for myself, for everyone, because it's what the Bible teaches, what's right and wrong. It's not that they're not allowed in the church. It's just we have to teach what the Bible teaches. We're supposed to change our lives to what the Bible says, not change what the Bible says to make how we live feel more comfortable. And, you know, then after that, she's like, well, she actually asked a question about when church was starting. We're like, you should come with us. And I have to say, sometimes, so she became a believer. She believed that there was, you know, a higher power, or, you know, now and she actually got baptized by my dad down in Cancun. Her and my other friend, they got baptized in the ocean down there. And they didn't tell me until after.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
crazy. What in the world?
It was actually at my wedding. So they were like, well, it was the day of it. They were like,
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
and I was like, they were like, well, we didn't want to bother you. And I was like, bother me?
Are you kidding?
cool.
That's a
awesome.
celebration,
Yeah.
But she now, her parents, her aunt and uncle, her brother, they all do Bible studies at their house now. And the whole family, none of them went to church before. So just by her going, you see how Jesus
Generations
loved
it'll
to spread.
The
Yeah, the
impact.
seeds that you planted in water. That's crazy.
And then I also feel she reads her Bible more than me. She does Bible studies, and I'm like,
That's awesome.
man, now I'm also learning and inspired by her, you know, because I'm
That's so
like,
cool.
I'm slacking.
No, that's awesome. That's what sharpening each other. That's awesome. That's what we're supposed to do. That's great. I love that foundation that your parents gave you. I think it's great. I thought that was one of the fun facts to learn about you. And have your parents been supportive of this? You hear so many times, like I grew up with sisters, so I heard, you think of fighting as more old people are taking out their aggressions or whatever. Like, has your family been behind this as your life choice career?
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
And that was like really, not really so much anymore because I've been doing this career for so long. But really in the beginning, that was the question that was always asked to my father. What do you feel about your daughter fighting? And, his answer, I kind of thought, he supported me.
That's awesome.
My mom, they both were like, they already knew I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I wanted to wrestle in high school, and back then there was a lot of women's wrestling wasn't really happening, and they thought, I don't really know if I want you being the only girl on the wrestling team, wrestling with the guys in high school. They didn't really, if I really wanted to do it, I think they would have supported it because they always wanted to support what our passions are in life. But I guess I didn't want to that badly because I really didn't push. And then when I started doing cardio kickboxing in between soccer seasons, just to keep in shape, because that was, my brothers wrestled. Okay. And we all took the same car to school, and we lived 30 minutes away. So while they would do that, I would go, soccer is a fall sport, and then I did nothing in the winter. So I started doing the cardio kickboxing, and that's when I started thinking, maybe I'll spar, and then, But it's like, when I wanted to do that, they were like, well, you always wanted to do something physical, so I think they just, my mom didn't love it. She, even though she's a very tough, independent woman too, my dad's like, everybody's got a little fighter in them. And one thing too is, it's not, my dad used to always say, it's the oldest sport in the book. Everybody has a fighter in them, And I think what a lot of people don't really think about when they think about fighting, it's not like you're going and picking on someone in the street.
Yeah, no.
It's two people signing the same, signing a contract
to beat the mess out of each other.
Yes, just it's
Take
to
their
follow.
discipline and see what they
You're
learn.
following the same dream, and you can't do it without the other person who also wants to do it. There's a lot of respect in it, a lot of understanding with each other. Awesome. And that's why you see these people, I'm gonna win. You get into it, and then after the fight, all these fighters are hugging. You share something in there. When you're both chasing a dream and a passion, even though you're on the opposite sides, there's still a respect that you have for each other. You share a piece of yourself in there. And it goes a lot deeper than what people just think, you're just beating each other up. No, we're both following a dream,
Never knew that fighting could be intimate.
That's right. Your dad was never like, she takes laying on of hands very seriously.
She shares the gospel with everybody she knows. Okay?
Jesus' name, bam.
Beat the truth in them. Do you remember the moment where you're like, this is what I'm going to do? Like, this is it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
I remember certain moments along the way. When I started doing cardio kickboxing, I didn't think I'd fight. But after aerobics class, there would be sparring classes, and I was like, that kind of looks fun. Yeah. So I started staying and sparring a little bit, and then I went and watched some smoker fights, just amateur fights of the teammates, and I was like, that looks really fun. So I thought I would try it one time, and after trying it, I was like, I knew I had to do it again, and I knew I loved it. Also, sports are in seasons, and fighting is year-round. And I never got sick of training, and that's when I knew I loved it. Don't get me wrong, there's days that I don't feel like training, and I still have to make myself get up and go, but I still love it. And sometimes at the end of soccer season, I'd be like, how many weeks do we have left? I'm like ready. And with, boxing or any kind of martial art, there's no season. You do it year-round. And you might be fighting in the winter, in the fall, in the summer, when you're, it's all different. And that's when I knew I was like, I don't really ever get sick of this, and this is all the time, this is for me. And then thought I'd try one fight.
And you were hooked?
You're hooked.
Yes, I loved it. So I didn't know with that.
Did you win your first fight? Your first fight?
Okay, so I have like 2 first fights.
Okay.
My first fight, I don't really consider as like my first fight, but it was my coach drove me down there. This girl was lighter than me, but had like 20 fights. So it was an exhibition fight. And on the way down there, he's like, hey, they're going to tell you this is an exhibition fight and not to go hard. And you're bigger than her, but she's had 20 fights, so I don't care. You're going to go hard. And I was like, okay.
It's a good coach.
Yeah, so we get down there, and
This is fun.
yeah, before they're like, this is an exhibition fight, so let's keep it clean. And in my head, I was like, he said they'd say that, you know? Like, the fight starts, and I just went off on her. Like, 4 punches, I just went crazy.
Wow.
And the other team threw in the towel, and they were like, it's an exhibition fight, like.
Yeah.
And my coach was like, oh, sorry. And I go over to the corner, and he starts taking my gloves, and he's like, good job. I was like,
right.
I think he just wanted to see if I had it in me.
Right.
You can teach skill to someone who has the fight, but, you know, there's a lot of
Cobra
skill.
Kai on her.
Yeah.
Strike hard, strike first,
Yeah.
no mercy.
And it was just quick. I don't even know if she threw anything. The fight was over.
Okay. So
they
you
threw
won
in the
that
towel.
fight.
So yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like kind of like
20 seconds, it was over.
yeah. And I don't really know if then I had a fight, weight class, all that, a kickboxing fight in Arizona, and it was with Sunshine Fettketter, and my coach is like, I heard she knows how to pace herself, but I just want you to go hard the whole time. You know, she's pretty strong, and she was big. And I was like, yeah, she is pretty strong. Well, she had been the Arizona state champion, and she already had all this experience, but he didn't tell me that. I'm thankful, because I probably would have been.
Mental.
Yeah, and we wound up having a majority draw. One judge had me winning, and 2 had it a draw, but it was a battle, you know. And that really was what I consider my first fight, which I'm glad, because it was like, I think that was my toughest amateur fight, and it was my first one. It's
Wow.
like, yeah, but I'm glad, because it made me really feel what feeling tired was, getting hit was, having to, you know, I made a lot of mistakes. You know, when they do the 10 seconds left and they clap,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's the end of the round, like in my head, and like I dropped my hands, and she just did a body shot. I literally fold all the way over, and I get up, and I'm just like, threw a bunch of kicks, like just wait until the end of the bell, and I was like, oh man.
Wrong bell.
Yeah.
Oh, my word.
My coach, I was like, I think she got my ribs, and he's like, nah, you're just out of breath. And then he just kept telling me what we need to do. I was like, okay. It's like,
Do you mind sharing? I was interested before sharing some of your injuries. You're like, oh yeah, I blew this, or they had to, how many surgeries? Like, do you mind just sharing a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, I don't
Amazes
mind,
me. A woman in our 40s.
Yeah,
You said
she
we
asked
have to say,
another athlete one time.
I
I was
did.
on a podcast, and he's like, yeah, all my teeth are
That's a hockey
they're all
player,
fake,
friend of
every one
mine.
of them.
I was kidding. I was like, how many real teeth do you have in there? And he's like, oh,
No,
this
not
is.
many.
I was like, oh my word. He was like,
It's fine.
you don't have to share anything you don't
Yeah.
want to share.
Yeah,
But
we might
yeah.
have to edit this part of like nothing is real on our
No,
faces.
but us, like, how many,
I'd
like,
say-
you said, 8 surgeries?
I've had 8, yeah.
Wow.
So which I went, everybody's like, aren't you afraid of getting your teeth knocked out? And all my friends actually have like some kind of fake teeth, and I had all of mine that are just mine.
Wow,
That
congratulations.
changed a few years
All
ago.
those are your
sorry.
teeth?
No,
Oh,
she said it
Yeah, they're
changed.
still my
She got
teeth,
some
but
of
I
that.
was,
There we
but
go.
all of them, like one of my friends from four-wheeling was like behind her dad on the four-wheeler. They were going up like a hill, and they hit a root in the ground, you
Oh,
know, a
that's
tree
bad.
root, and it went back, and she went like that, and her dad's helmet and her teeth clashed months after she got her braces off in like 7th or 8th
how
grade. And all of
sad.
these are, like she has caps on all of them from a young age, you know, and like from just weird stuff. All my friends have at least one like cap or filler on all their teeth, and I never did. And so when
Wow.
people are like, aren't you afraid of getting your teeth knocked out? I'm like, all my friends have none of theirs.
Yeah.
But at one of my fights, I got kicked and it hit just right, and it hit the nerve here, and I was like, man, they feel. I wound up having to get whatever nerve went to these 2 teeth. I wound up having to get a root canal in both of them, so they're still my teeth, but
Okay.
they're like filled with
Stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, right, like
Yep.
a root canal. So I still have all of my teeth, but these 2 are.
Crowns.
They're not crowns.
Just
They're
hanging in there.
Yeah, they took the root out and like filled it with
Gotcha.
fakes,
Okay.
whatever, you know.
Cool.
They
So
start-
you've
yeah.
had some dental care.
Yeah,
And then
that
you
was
said
the
you
first
broke an
time,
arm.
My last fight before the UFC, when I was fighting for the title in LFA, I blocked a kick in the first round and broke this bone, and I wound up knocking her out in the 5th, thank goodness. But
With the
that
broken arm?
was- yeah,
You had to
well,
keep playing?
Well, the whole
Of
time in the
course, you
fight,
can't
I'm like,
stop.
yeah, it's like.
God blessed her with 2 good arms.
my
Or
gosh.
another good one.
Oh, I just kept thinking, as soon as it kicked, I felt a snap, and then I was like, did I just break my arm? And then I like would go like this, it was like, you know? And I was like, well, broken arm in a win or broken arm in a loss, it's already broken.
you gotta make
Broken
it
arm in a loss is gonna hurt a lot worse. So my coaches kept telling me to throw my left, and I was like, it was on Access TV, and I didn't want them to hear it, the commentators to hear it and say something, her corner to hear it, or, you know, people are even watching online, they're like, hey, the corner said this, or people do that. And then they'll like text the cornerman and they're like, hey, her arm's broken, so I don't want her to attack it. So I didn't want to say anything. And then finally, after the third round, my coach came in and I walked to the door instead of to like our corner, like face to face before the cameras were in there. And I was like, hey, just between you and me, I think my arm's broken. And he said, which arm? Left. How bad? I can still fight. That was like our whole conversation. So they could kind of like at least change, you know. And then he told my other coach during the fourth, like in secret while I was fighting. And then after that, then Coach Greg was like, hey, I know this, you know, we know you don't have to go out of your way for it, but let it go. Only if she comes in, still make her pay. You know, it's already. And that's what I love about my coaches. They know that I, like, ultimately you want to win, and it's already, what already done is done. It's already gonna have to be fixed. So, and then I finally knocked her out. I mean, I was winning the whole fight, but then I finally knocked her out with a head kick in the fifth round.
Pretty good with those head kicks.
Yeah. Like,
2015.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world went nuts in 2015 with the head kick.
Yep.
That was crazy.
Yeah. There's a story about. I mean, like, this kind of, when I was 18, my dad and I were having dinner, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but it was an emotional time. We were both crying. Life was a little crazy at the time. There was a lot going on, some dramatic things. And I remember my dad just stopped and he looked at me and he's like, you know, I don't know what it is in this life, but I feel like you're going to do something that's going to just impact the whole world, that's going to be known. And he's like, I just think it's destiny. And he's like, I don't know what that is, but I just think you have big things, like you're going to affect people. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, you know, when I had like, he only told me this probably like 2 other times in my career. And he didn't tell me that. That was before I was actually fighting, like, especially before, I think I'd maybe had one amateur fight at that point. So he didn't say anything about fighting. Then when I had one of my big fights, a big rematch after I got knocked out, my bad knockout I was just talking about. I did rematch her and beat her, by the way. So, but before that fight, it was one of those things. He's like, you know, I just think it's destiny. You know, a lot of people were telling me to retire, even including people that were really close to me, and I had to really like dig deep. And there was even one of my coaches that was the assistant coach. He didn't want me to take the rematch. And when you have people sometimes like that are even the closest to you telling you should either retire or not take the fight, I was like, man, it makes you feel weak, because if they believed in you, you would feel stronger. And I had to realize, though, that sometimes it doesn't matter really, even when it's all by love. It was out of care, but also I knew in my heart I wanted to take it. I knew my other coach believed. I knew. You know, it was like I kind of had to almost like separate myself from people who were being negative. And
Absolutely.
Pretty much the entire world was like, why is she taking this rematch? And I had to stand on my own belief and in myself, even with that much negativity. And even my family was like, Holly, you don't have to take this fight, even though I knew they would support me if I did. But they'd almost a little hesitant at first too. I took that rematch and won. And then, of course, then everybody's like, oh my gosh, that was the most inspiring thing. It's like,
Back in your corner.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that was a time I had to really like, I would just go to the gym. I couldn't even spar at the time because my concussion was so bad. But I would just go at the gym to feel normal. Because everybody else would like almost look at me like, oh, she's still alive. You know, I'd be out in public and it's like people are constantly looking at me like I'm some damaged goods, you know. And that was a time I really had to believe in myself, and no matter what negativity was around, it was coming from everywhere. And it was also, I was engaged at the time. They're like, well, you're going to get married too, so, and I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
Right.
This is what I've been doing my whole life. This is my passion. What is like, now I have to change everything of who I was just because, it's like, what does that even mean? And so to go back to the thing with my dad, before the fight with Rhonda, everyone, when I got that fight, I only had 2 fights in the UFC, and then they put me up for the title, which is a very fast path to the title fight. And everybody was like, you don't have to take this fight. You can wait. And I was like, if I'm not ready now, when will I be? And when I called my dad, I was like, hey, I know my next fight. And he goes, all right, tell me who it is, and I'll look her up. And I was like, oh, it's Rhonda. And he goes, oh, it's Destiny. When everybody else was like, are you sure? Are you like, oh, are you excited? Because they didn't want to say anything negative or.
And she never had lost a fight at that time, right?
No, hadn't. Yeah, and my dad was just like, yeah. And it was like, that made me feel calm.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was like, gosh.
Destiny. That's pretty cool.
And then one, which if anybody looks it up now, they'll see me hugging my dad. It's the only time my dad's been inside the cage of any of my fights. But there's a huge hug, but nobody sees the moment that was just between him and I, which I'm glad because it was just our moment. But as he's coming through the cage door, I look at him and he goes, Destiny, baby. And I'm
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome.
And then we hug, but nobody ever saw that, like,
That's sweet.
that exchange between us. It was just ours.
Yeah.
And then, but I mean, they have the hug on camera,
That's awesome.
Man, there's so much spiritual application of
There it is.
just-
Yeah.
of one starting there with that affirmation from the Father. And so when we get our affirmation from our Heavenly Father, those voices about everybody else, those don't matter. Even when you have those that are closest to you saying, yeah, you should probably retire, or you're getting a little old, or you're about to get married, all these things, it reminded me of those that were close to Jesus, and they said, isn't this just Jesus, the carpenter from Nazareth? And a Mepping dude comes from Nazareth, and these that he goes to his hometown and he can't even perform very many miracles just because they did not honor him. And it's cool that you said you really had to lock in and you had to be sure of yourself and cut out the voices from all around you. And yet that's what a lot of times, especially us as Christians, I think people get afraid to either speak up or share the gospel with somebody or share their testimony, all because of fear of that voice of, and are you really saved? Are you really a disciple? Hey, you remember that thing that you did? You really probably shouldn't do that. So we listen to all these voices when really we should be in tune with our Father and get our affirmation from our Father, just like you did with your earthly father,
And I do think too, sometimes and I found myself in this position, like you're saying, to like be vocal or like kind of quiet about it. It's sometimes I don't want to say too much, or found myself not wanting to say too much because I know I'm flawed, and then I'm like, I'm going to do something wrong, and then I'm going to see I'm doing something wrong, and I'm going to look like a hypocrite, or but that doesn't help anything either. It's always better to spread.
That's just a little lie from the enemy. That's all it is. And again, we talk about this off camera, and I think it's key is it goes back to that identity piece. Like, knowing that ultimately a UFC champion is not your identity. Being known as the preacher's daughter is not an identity. Being a wife is not an identity, but being a disciple, a follower of Jesus, that is our true identity. And so we all have to get that, because the enemy knows if he can keep us away from our true identity, he can keep us away from our purpose in life. And so even in those big moments or small moments, we have to be centered on what's our identity.